In 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Playoff NFL football rolls on. I think we are coming upon my most anticipated, most excited NFL weekend of the year, every year. And I got to tell you, this year might be delivering the goods unlike any of the previous years I can imagine, whatever. I'm so fired up for this four game slate. Every one of these games has something interesting to dive into. We are joined by analytical expert, math PhD, and just general good guy to be friends with in the football space, Dr. Eric Eager. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
It's so different to hear the woman that starts the show say Drew Dinzik and not the white whale. I was caught off guard a little bit here, but I know that you guys are moving on up and things change.
It's wild, man. I flipped at the Super Bowl last year. I figured, okay, NFL season's over. If I'm going to switch to, not being an anonymous cartoon whale to a real person, now's the time. And it unlocked all kinds of opportunity. People, major media companies called all summer long. It was like, okay, maybe I should have done this sooner. I don't know if there's a correlation or what.
Like, it's not that hard. Just put a picture up. People will see you.
It's a lot more fun, obviously. I mean, we do so much video anyway. It's not like there was a big secret. So, but
and now it's so much nicer because like we've normalized calling you Drew. Like I remember the first trip out to Vegas when I met some people for like my first trip meeting like internet people, like gambling Twitter people. It's like, I'm not going to call you whale to your face. That's messed up. Like we're going to call you your name. Like, the people with the internet monikers, like, I can't call you that. That's not.
I'm the other way around. I liked it. I liked the random handles.
There was a couple people that I still did.
Yeah.
So,
well, anyway, PFF Eric is here.
Eric's just an Eric.
Boy, we need your help, man. We need your help because this betting card is tight. It's tight. I only have one play that I've made so far this weekend. I'll keep the suspense. You probably know this, but I'll keep it tight for now until we get there. But I'm probably going to bet more. We're definitely going to bet second halves. But I'd like to try to pick a couple of more advantages off this card somehow, some way, and it's tough. And just kind of setting the stage overall. Going back to how excited I am about this weekend in general, the NFC. You have a perfect dichotomy of these two conferences right now too. NFC, you have all this experience, all of this, grizzled veterans at quarterback. I think all four starting quarterbacks for the NFC this week have been to Super Bowls. I think in total, you're talking about 12 Super Bowl appearances in this group of four men. In total, something like 8 or 9 Super Bowl wins. Most of them Tom Brady, but we'll put that aside for now.
Yeah, Tom Brady plus 8.
Tom Brady, Rodgers, and Brees has one. So, but it's a cool, it's just experience and veteran leadership on the quarterback position on the NFC. Whereas in the AFC, you have the much more exciting teams. The up and comers. You had Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson all record their first ever playoff wins last week, going up against Pat Mahomes, who won his first Super Bowl last year. And thank God those guys won, by the way, because I was genuinely concerned about the long-term competitive balance in the AFC as we headed into this season. Like the Chiefs might be that much better than everybody else, and if Lamar and Allen and Mayfield, if these guys don't take a meaningful step forward and win a playoff game, then this might be round 2 of just Brady and Manning or whatever dominating the AFC here. So thankfully, it looks like we've kind of restored a little competitive balance to the AFC. And I guess overall, like these games are all competitive. You only have one game that's got double-digit spreads usually. We have 4 teams coming off of buys and these huge inflated numbers to bet into on divisional weekend. These games are all relatively tight. Do you have in general the same, sort of enthusiasm, Eric, as I do coming into this football weekend?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was helping Fox out with the Seattle LA broadcast. I know they said if the chalk holds in the NFC this week, we're gonna have 4 Hall of Fame quarterbacks in round 2. And I joked, okay, yeah, but if the underdogs win, you get a number 1 overall pick in Alex Smith, you get a number 1 overall pick in Jared Goff, and that's how we're gonna roll here. But obviously that didn't end up materializing, but I do think in both cases the 6th seed, the underdog that ended up winning, was the better. Like, that was the good thing that happened. And I went into the Sunday night game as a fan of Kansas City, also somebody who has Kansas City futures, obviously rooting for Cleveland, but I also think Cleveland winning just makes this week more competitive because, the Ravens Chiefs, we've seen that game script happen the way it's happened before, where Kansas City could blow them out. They have, a sort of like a type in which, and I think Buffalo kind of is Kansas City light. So we'll have to talk about that in a second. But like Kansas City's type blows Baltimore out in a decent number of sample paths. Whereas, so you throw that game out. And I also think that Buffalo would have just handled Pittsburgh. So Buffalo getting Baltimore in round 2, and Kansas City getting Cleveland, who I think will be a tough out. That is, I think, the more competitive version. And then you go over to the other side, and obviously getting New Orleans. So here's the funny thing. Drew Brees and Tom Brady have accounted for 45% of all the passing yards in league history that have been thrown by men over 40 years old.
You said the second part of
I was like,
you're out of your core.
No way. For 40-year-olds. Okay.
Brady has accounted for almost 2/3 of the playoff passing yards that have been thrown by men over 40 himself. So it's a crazy geriatric like game, but you get that cool rematch between those two teams. And then weirdly, as weak as LA is on offense, their defense, I think, is uniquely suited to give the Green Bay Packers a game because of the way that they deploy Jalen Ramsey. And obviously, you have Aaron Donald, who's banged up, but against the Green Bay offensive lines, it's normally strong, but without David Bakhtiari, probably a little bit weaker, at least at that tackle position. So I went into last week thinking, oh my gosh, 3 games both days, and then the national championship game on Monday. This is the new best weekend of football. And obviously all the dumbass decisions that some of these guys are making slap me upside the face. This is still, and has always been, the best weekend of NFL football.
And I mean, to your point about the matchups going the way they went, and, Drew and I talked about, and, the question everybody was posing, who would you rather see your Ravens play for future purposes? And it was the opposite of what happened. But at the same time, it is maybe a better matchup. And, to get the Ravens to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to go through Kansas City at some point, most likely. It is what it is. I don't think there's a huge difference between playing them now or playing them next week. If they do get through Buffalo, they are a dog. But like you said, the matchups are great. I think all of the games, if I didn't bet any of the games and I just said the outcomes, I think it is perfect for me too. I didn't want to see another Seattle game. As high as I was on Pittsburgh preseason, I wanted no more of that. I wanted no more of Big Ben with his pout face throwing balls into the defensive lineman's hands. I was fine with that game going how it went. And honestly, the live overs that everyone was able to hit in that was more than worth watching Pittsburgh suffer. So yeah, the Cleveland moving on, I think it's fun. They're a fun team now. We've said this for years. I wish podcasts were searchable by word, because I feel like we've said this, 5-6 times, where we talk about Cleveland in 2018 and 2019 and 2020, doing our previews, going through the years, and we say, man, they got OBJ, they got their quarterback that's not looking horrible. They've got some receivers, they've got backs, they've got a defense at some points. Are we just a coach away because, of 2 years ago, and then the Freddie Kitchens failed experiment. Like we've said that numerous times. Like, are they just a coach away? And I mean, it's that Mike Zimmer coaching tree.
I think, yeah. I mean, as me growing up watching the Vikings, you look at Billick and Tomlin and
Dungy.
Pete Carroll and all these assistants that Vikings have had that have turned out to be good. The interesting Seattle, you're 100% right. There's no reason to ever have to watch that team again. They did that to themselves. They became that way themselves. That should never be rewarded. The cool thing, so you add Stefanski to the list. Here's a great question I've been asking people all week, I think. Who's the worst coach left in the playoffs?
Bruce Arians?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's true. And Bruce is not a bottom half of the league coach. Bruce is a league average coach, right? Like every single – so like –
he's a cool.
Ravens Bills is a Spider-Man meme game from the perspective of both teams are smart. Both teams are analytically sound. They use all 4 downs. Both teams are moving in the right direction. They have young quarterbacks from 2018. Like the model franchises, obviously Cleveland, I think, squeezes all the juice out of the orange. Kansas City's not the most analytical team in the world, but obviously they got Reed and Mahomes that covers all the sins. And then on the other side, LaFleur's 26-6 over 2 years. McVay has his reputation, which I think is deserved. And obviously Sean Payton. Like this is the cream of the crop. If you ever wanted to make an argument that being intelligent in football pays off, like just scoreboard the entire season this year.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I honestly, the fact that there was so much made of coaching, blunders last week, these guys have ears. They watch the highlights. It's going around league circles, I'm sure. I think we get a pretty exciting set of games. Honestly, there's probably going to be some aggressiveness. I don't know what happens when you're in the moment, when the stakes are this high, when the leverage is that high, your guts are probably exploding and you're like making terrible decisions because you just don't know any better. But I like all these guys. I guess I don't love McVay's in-game decisions. I don't love Andy Reid's clock management. There's a couple of things you can nitpick here and there about some of these other guys. Sean, there's a couple of things here and there that you can potentially identify as weaknesses, but overall, I think it's going to be a great weekend. Andy, can you?
LaFleur, yeah. I mean, just spend a minute on LaFleur.
Well, I
know when you get
his influence on roster construction is a disaster.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you get to him, you referenced his record. I think I don't want to say like jury's out because you still have to make it work. Like we've seen good rosters fail. I mean, I just referenced Cleveland, who had a pretty decent roster and failed multiple times with it. So like, I don't want to just say jury's out on LaFleur because he has a Hall of Fame quarterback who had a sudden, not only a resurgence, and maybe there's some signal eventually for him having something to do with Rodgers, a real good year compared to some of the decline we saw over the last 5 years for him. But so I'm not like jury's out on him at all. I guess if you have any thoughts on that, other than the Packers are good because they have Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they did a good job adding some defensive pieces 2 years ago. The draft this year was weird, obviously, for him.
Yeah, that's my big hang up.
LaFleur's
long-term, long arc vision is a huge question mark.
Well, last year they were a 9 or 10 win team fundamentally. So that was always the mark on them. And, it was really telling that the Vikings and the Vikings and Packers had the same point spread against San Francisco in the playoff game. So, the betting markets, I think, rightfully priced Minnesota and Green Bay as the same team. And then you fast forward to 2020. And, I think we talked about this either on your guys' show or our show, which was Minnesota closed as the favorite in the NFC North, despite all of the things that we knew about them, Cousins limitations, Hunter's injury, a lack of vision there. And, there were always these question marks about Green Bay, which I thought didn't really appreciate the time horizon. And of course, this is easy to see in hindsight, but Rodgers takes the slightest slight and turns it into motivation. I don't know if this year is sustainable for him, but he's been awesome. But you look at their wins this year, and they have two wins against teams with winning records. So while their point differential is a lot better than it was last season, I believe it's still one of those 13-3s where there are question marks attached to it. And, but at the same time, when I look at our PFF WAR value, like Rodgers is the most valuable quarterback, Adams is the most valuable wide receiver, Lindsley's the most valuable center, Amos is the most valuable safety, and Alexander's the most valuable corner. So they have, like, this season, I think if you grade out the players, they are about as strong as anybody save Kansas City, but there are still question marks there as far as, what happens when you make them play left-handed. Like I think about the Chargers game in 2019, or I think about the Tampa Bay game this year, even the Minnesota game where this is how sharp people are in the NFL. The weather comes out as being windy, right? And everybody gravitates towards Minnesota because of style of play, and Minnesota beats them outright. Like there are certain aspects of the Green Bay sort of experience that are not robust with respect to changes.
Can it
I was going to mention that game as an analog because the drive, if you go look at that drive chart, and we've referenced this before, the Vikings game, that first half had 4 drives. And I mean, Minnesota was doing, it's different scheme, but essentially riding not a hot running back, a good running back and a good run scheme against a team who can't, stop a running back. And they moved down the field, but they moved down kind of slowly, methodically, a few third downs, but never anything crazy. And then essentially the Packers really did the same. I believe it was just 4 really long drives. It felt like the weird game. I went to a bar. That's when bars were open, and I watched that. And boy, they were so pumped. Like everyone was so excited. I live in Vikings country. Like, oh, this is it. They're turning it around. And there was even some MVP talk for Dalvin at that point by halftime. And it's like, I don't think this is a good team, but this is certainly the game plan that's going to work against this team.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. We sit here. I hold no Green Bay futures, not $1. In fact, if Green Bay goes and runs on and wins the Super Bowl, my overall book is going to be light. I'm not. I think I'm still going to be fine. If I can get some AFC tickets home, but I've never really bought in, and I think fundamentally, a lot of what you said, while true, and a lot of the ratings that you have in terms of value on a lot of those players, I wonder how much of that is influenced by the strength of their schedule. Because when you weigh not only who they played, which was weak, but when they played them, in terms of when teams were just falling apart and or unready to play, that they played New Orleans early in the season when they were treating it like a preseason game. They played the Vikings week 1 when the Vikings had they were expecting contributions from a dozen rookies, with no preseason. They got a lot of breaks, and down the stretch they played a cupcake after cupcake. They get the Titans on a day when there's snow on the field and no one can get the offensive linemen look like they're wearing ice skates. It was a very fortuitous schedule for them.
They get backdoored by the Detroit Lions. They get back to the Detroit Lions back at quarterback.
Yeah. The only thing that didn't break their way was the Colts game where they had all those fluky fumbles, right? The kick return fumble and they should have won that game. Oh,
well, that was the game.
Yeah, sorry.
That game was weird though because
on that one. They should have won that game. Anyway, good.
The referees gave Indy 4 holding calls in the penultimate drive where Indy, that was a game. I feel we had a graphic that was put on the Fox broadcast, so that was like a fun game for us. It was but that was the one where they went for the 4th down and converted, right? And then they go, holding call, punt. Green Bay drives the length of field, scores a field goal. Then Marquez Valdes-Scantling fumbles in overtime. That was the game on our pregame show. I was like, I think the Colts win because Green Bay's soft. I actually think that Green Bay is if you grade the players out player by player by player, they're better, but they're not. They're not a great 4th down team. They don't make the best 4th down decisions. They're better than average, but they're not perfect. And then I think their secondary receivers, their defensive line, their linebackers are not what I would consider if they can get bullied. And the Rams here, that's really their only recourse. Shut Adams down on the other side of the field and play bully ball with the Packers on that side of the ball and hope the game becomes about their front seven. Because if the game becomes about Jared Goff throwing against the Packers secondary, I think it's going to be a nightmare. But if they make the game about the front seven, it might be worthwhile for them.
Okay.
Well, the headlines are, you see this. We're how many days out, and you're seeing tweets about, if you guys even had one, I'm sure, but just like wide receiver 1 versus quarterback 1. I think that was the PFF tweet, and everyone's, oh man, we're going to see this awesome matchup. The matchup that are going to matter are the second and third receivers for Green Bay against wherever they end up on the field. If they're getting any, if you're not going to end up with some safety help to the guys that aren't getting shadowed by, stud cornerback number 1, it doesn't matter what the name on the back of the jersey, if it doesn't say Adams. If those guys have gotten separation, and I get it, that it's not like there's a giant drop off to cornerback 2. But
there's very little space. Maybe
it's
the rest of those guys in the secondary for the Rams.
They're still very good. Yeah, they have 3 good cover guys, but just the way Rodgers can throw people open and the separation, those secondary receivers haven't been shit.
Well, here's the thing. Let me just add to that though. Like MVP Aaron Rodgers. Period. I don't think it's debatable. You brought it up before. Last year they were a 10-win team that won 13 games. Everybody knew it. Right. This year they win 13 games and their point differential would say that 13 was fair. Their strength of schedule is still a huge question mark. We haven't seen Aaron Rodgers really have to answer from down multiple scores except that Bucs game, and they just packed it in. So I guess that's kind of the key thing that I would like to know is Aaron Rodgers was poor by a relative comparison for 4 years. Was that because of something specific that we just haven't seen manifest in a game this year by randomness, or is there signal? Is it a motivational thing? Really? He wasn't motivated the last couple of years. They draft a quarterback and now he's trying. Like, that seems crazy. That seems crazy to me. This guy's a Hall of Famer. Like he was got 1 Super Bowl and he's been the best quarterback in the NFL, going on 10 years by a lot of people's estimations. So like, I can't believe that this is a motivational thing. We know he's not necessarily a risk taker. We know that he's not, necessarily going to throw them back into games if they're down multiple scores based on past examples. Now, it may not manifest in this game. In fact, it probably won't. I mean, I don't think that this is a track meet where the Rams look amazing and, score on, their first 3 drives and all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, it's 21-0 Rams. How are, Packers going to answer? Like that's not a game state that I think is high pop probability at all. But at some point during this playoff run, are they going to run up against a team where he's going to have to force, they're going to force him to be more risk tolerant, and we're not going to see it? Is that in the back of your head at all about Rodgers' performances these playoffs?
Well, would it surprise you guys that Rodgers had fewer yards passing this year than? Well, I guess I'm also including playoffs in this. Let me make sure that I just do regular season here. I mean, okay, so Rodgers had fewer yards this year than the last year that when he played for McCarthy. Which is interesting. I mean, they've been efficient in a weird way. You look at
just winning so many of these games so comfortably.
Right. So you look at these throwaways, right? So in 2018, Rodgers had 597 pass attempts and threw the ball away on 59 of them. 10% of his throws were throwaways. That was a record for our database. 39 throwaways last year, 32 this year. Sacks, 49 in 2018, 36 last year, 20 this year. I think that, and then scrambles, 34 and 18, 26 last year, 24 this year. They're just doing a lot of things more on script. And what have they really leaned into? They've leaned on the idea that Devontae Adams can beat the other team's best player within 2.5 seconds, right? I mean, and Rodgers 1, 2, 3, boom. Back with McCarthy, he got to that third step, and he didn't trust the offense, and that led to the throwaways, that led to the scrambles. He only threw 2 interceptions in 2018. Like obviously there was some preservation going on there. He has 5 this year, which is the most he's had in the last 3 years or so.
It's still amazing.
It's still amazing, but I think that there's a little bit more of a trust in the system. So to Drew's point, though, if if this game goes pear-shaped, right, and Adams is covered in the first 2.5 seconds, let's say Marquez Valdez-Scantling drops a deep pass, or Alan Lazard gets hurt, or Tongan's not open on the wheel or something like that, and he goes 1, 2, 3, boom, and no one's open. Well, David Bakhtiari's out now. Aaron Donald's hurt, but he's still really good, and that interior offensive line is good, not perfect. Then you might see more sacks, you might see more throws, you might see the thing get pear-shaped. And to me, I think if you're a Rams backer, that's what you're really hoping for.
I mean, I just like we made it through this whole season, and we really never saw the going get tough for Aaron Rodgers this season, which is crazy. Like,
can you say?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, can you say some of that was him buying into the LaFleur system, the script? I get.
Was he not bought in the NFC title game last year, though? Like, that's the kind of game that I'm worried about.
That team wasn't as good. I believe this team's better.
Just because the players have matured a year, and they didn't have an off season.
I think people just look at records and be like, well, that team was better. What was the Packers finishing record this year? Was it 13-3
both years?
Yeah, same record as last year.
Yeah, I mean that team reached the NFC title game, and we had no
hesitation. No hesitation backing.
We pulled the trigger on San Francisco -7 like that.
Yeah.
We were like that should be more. And we bet that. We were very confident in that play. We said that this is not a team that deserves to be here. And this year I don't feel that way, even though I have trouble marrying the idea of you haven't played anybody, because we see that all the time where teams play bad teams and they get it done. And there is something to be said for being tested. It does help. Like
you played the least amount of anybody's, though.
I know that, and it's tough because you play enough seasons with enough good teams. There's going to be a good team that plays a bad schedule, and we're going to have to sit. And that's what's tough. We're going to have to sit here and figure it out. Like, are they good because they're good? Or are they good because of the not playing anybody?
So in this game, though, how do the Rams beat them? Like, I can see. Look, I think there's a mathematical. Like, if you don't properly price Jared Goff's thumb, and we really don't know, there's a ton of uncertainty here. We've seen, like, I don't know what last week was, because I don't think he was prepared to play with a broken thumb. I think he was going to stand on the sideline and be an emergency guy. They're going to obviously try some things this week because he's going to be the starting quarterback. But like, if I think, okay, Goff is 50% of the guy he normally is, I still think there's an edge on LA against the spread at 6.5. But then the question becomes, okay, you add, like, if you want to do any manual adjustments here, like, how much is, like, the fact that it's cold, it's Green Bay, I don't know. Like, part of me looks at how McVay did against Tampa Bay on that Monday night game and say he's capable of a game plan to cover the multitude of sins, and this is the meat grinder for Green Bay. The other side of me says that it's, they're so bad on offense. He was negative EPA even before getting hurt per dropback was Goff. That, does it even matter necessarily if Rodgers plays a crap game, because they could win this game, let's say they go 19-13 or something like that.
Yeah, and honestly, like the whole slice of outcomes we're ignoring, which is Green Bay comes out and looks sharp, scores a couple touchdowns.
Good front running team.
Yeah, Devontae Adams wins his 1v1 versus Jalen Ramsey a couple times early in this game. I mean, good night now. I do not see a way that the Rams get back into it with the deficit. As soft as Green Bay has been with the lead on defense in terms of allowing garbage points this year, they haven't given up leads to lose games. It's mostly just been
a loser quarterback. Like, it's
against the loser quarterback.
Like, the comeback is a lot tougher when your game plan is Akers is going to have a good game. Hopefully Goff's thumb he can feel his thumb.
And I'm not trying to rub it in necessarily, but the Rams are from LA. And I got to tell you, I've been getting my sunshine lately. It's been nice here. It's been like 60. We're talking about like 69-ish most of these days in January. And it's not going to feel great to be in sub-freezing weather outdoors with a deficit, with broken ribs or cartilage or whatever the hell Aaron Donald has, with a broken thumb that Goff has, with some of the other ailments that these guys have. I have really struggled to see a game state where if the Rams lose their 1v1s early, they get back into this.
There's a storm rolling through Minnesota Friday night. Like I've got some weather alerts like, oh, winter storm warning, 4 to 7 inches Friday night. Like, God, is that gonna be a problem? Is there gonna be? I guess keep an eye on that, because stuff like this pops up all the time. But yeah, if it's cold and windy, like honestly, that cold is one thing, but cold and windy is miserable. And if there's any precipitation and you're a little bit wet too, like they might want to just go home.
Well,
Everybody.
and the Rams defense, I know that there was the Robert Mays article. There was the article that I wrote about, like, how to play defense in the modern NFL, which is really what LA does. They play too high, and they worry about the coverage first, and they trust their defensive linemen to basically eat blocks, and maybe interior players that don't get that much pressure are actually valuable because they cause more pressure by allowing you to play six defensive backs frequently. If that's what LA wants to deploy in the cold against Green Bay, where you hit them with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, and there might be a limitation to that approach, right? It might be very similar to Andy and my growing up with the Twins, where you can approach can win 90 games in 162, but you can't win 4 out of 7 in the playoffs. That might be like where the Rams defensive approach hits its problems in the weather, because that I think with all my mind that that's the right way to play defense in a 16-game season to win 10 to 12 games. I don't know necessarily that in the cold of January in Green Bay that's going to work all that well, especially with Donald banged up.
So you're telling me Aaron Jones over props. What is it? You're telling me Aaron Jones over props. So
yeah, that or Dillon. I mean, Dillon, what do you think they hang Dillon's number at? Do you think it's widely available, and do you think it's
probably 15? No,
15 and a half, 18.
12, I mean, that's worth something, isn't it?
I guess
once Rod Jones gets tired, or they do have a lead if it's a front running game, and he's gonna get like 6-8 carries in late in the game, maybe.
I've lost count of how many times there's been a highly touted 1v1 like Adams Ramsey. And highly talked about Donald against a replacement left tackle, and the coach is like, he knows that. LaFleur knows this. What are the chances that his game plan is largely rushing focused, ball control? Like, we know he wants to do that kind of in his gut anyway. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's sort of plan A here for the Packers. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
No, I don't disagree at all, and I think there's the limitation to that approach, where I think we're going to talk about this with Baltimore versus Buffalo, but the limitation to playing that approach is if you are not sturdy against the run and they gash you for 7 yards an attempt, that fails. and as much as we all like the passing game, there's a limit to that approach.
Sure. That's true. That's true.
I like the baseball analogy too. It's like it made me think of like Moneyball, and how it's a team that's built to win over the long haul. You can get into the playoffs, but you're not winning a playoff series without a number 1 and a number 2 starter. And I mean, Goff is a light hitting shortstop. I mean, that feels like it works over a long period of time where it's not going to kill you, but he's not the kind of quarterback, even though he's a quarterback who went. I mean, this is a team that went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and we're just ragging on him. But
it's the same thing with Garoppolo in San Fran. It's like everything has, you had to hit an inside flush to make the Super Bowl, and like that's a formula to sort of keep you relevant, but it's not. It's really not. I mean, I think about football like bets. Like if you try to win like the Ravens do, the Ravens make a 5-team parlay bet on offense. Everything's got to go right for that thing to work. The Chiefs make one big ass bet on Mahomes on offense.
I'm going to get to some Chiefs similes later. We'll keep these in the canon for now. The final thoughts on the betting market here. So we've seen this one open up 8.5.
We kind of covered the whole Rams Packers.
No, excellent. That was an excellent breakdown. I thought I wouldn't do it any differently.
Didn't even put the banner on.
That's okay. Look, we saw this. We saw this open 8.5. There was a lot of soft money came in on the Rams, pushed this thing down to 7. I have been surprised personally to see this cross 7.
We said it on Monday. Neither of us thought we'd see enough to go across 7.
No, and I'm, I had a little bit of, I was flirting with the Rams. I was like, that's perfect matchup. This is the toughest matchup the Green Bay's offense is going to face. It's just nothing's perfect for them. I have cooled on that substantially. The Jared Goff cold weather, small hands things scaring the hell out of me. Anyway,
do you guys think that defense is overvalued a little bit in the betting markets?
In general, a little bit. In the playoffs,
not enough.
I don't know. I don't think it is
long term if you blindly bet against a good defense. But I always think that I do sometimes with games like this. I do sometimes come back to, are we overthinking it with that? Yeah, and that's to your point, Drew, where the coaches also know that Adams is facing Ramsey, so we're not pulling a fast one on anybody here.
No, the defense is underrated in the betting market for Rams home games. I will tell you that much. all 8 of those went under with a bullet. But anyway,
when we talk about defense, so it's like when we talk about weather and how wind is important, but rain really isn't. And we have talked about slippery conditions can actually hurt the defense. It's not just it's not a demerit for both sides, because the defense is reactive. The defensive players have to be reactive to what the offense does. And I like what you said about that is we know what Jalen Ramsey is. We know what Aaron Donald is. Obviously an NFL coaching staff with 2 weeks know what, they look at all the, I'm sure you don't get 2 weeks to prepare for the Rams. You didn't know they'd win, but an NFL coaching staff knows what they're up against, and they don't dictate what you do. You dictate what you do. You're the offense. The offense, to a certain point, yes, a defense can dictate if they want to take something completely away, they absolutely can if they try hard enough. But you've seen it enough from and I'm not going to compare LaFleur to Belichick, but Belichick's done this numerous times where it's oh, you want to take that away? That's going to be really funny when we just beat the shit out of you with Ben Jarvis Green Ellis or something hilarious. Yeah. Or Jonas Gray, or there was a Vikings game years ago where the rush defense was very, very, very good. They were allowing 60 yards a game on the ground.
Yeah, and Monday Night Football.
They just threw it 45 times. That was the game. We're just going to throw every down.
That was, by the way, Andy, that was Tomlin's only year as the Vikings coordinator. And they were first against the run, 32nd against the pass. And Brady, and that was a quote down year for the Patriots. And I think they came in the Metrodome and went 5 wide the whole game and fooled the Vikings by throwing to Jabbar Gaffney and Rashae Caldwell. It was some of these. And it was so simple.
It was so simple. If they're going to stop the run, why would we run? When you look at it in hindsight, it's is Belichick a genius, or is he just he's just not reading in between the lines and overthinking things?
Yeah. So anyway, in summary, I'm glad that the ship sailed on the Rams without me. I'm glad that I did not involved in that now, knowing what we know. I'm sad that the ship sailed on me on the under. I don't know that there's betting value now at 45.5, just because of sort of, I don't know. Should I be worried about garbage time points that the Rams score in this one?
No, you should be worried about Packers garbage time points when they're with their lead.
Yeah. Well, The Packers have shown a propensity to score that sort of, what was it, the Eagles game where the Eagles came back and almost backdoored, and then Aaron Jones went 95 for a touchdown to sort of actually cover. And, they're neither one of these teams is all that predictable at the end of the game. I do wonder, though, if Goff, sort of can't if Goff can't get it done, do they go? I don't know if you guys remember Tebow's last playoff game when they were just getting rolled by New England, and basically all they did was hand off for the last 2 quarters of the game. I wonder if and that was Tebow had broken ribs. He also was garbage, but if Goff can't do anything, right? Do they kind of hand off?
At some point, does McVay tell LaFleur what his plan for an attack would be, because there could be potential future matchups between these teams in the playoffs.
Right.
It might be worth it to keep it a little close to your chest, exactly what you would do to attack the Packers. So I get all that.
Yeah, and that you probably don't see Bortles then. You don't want to give away next year's game plan.
More likely to make their team total here. Packers 26 or Rams 19.5.
Packers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do the Rams get to 20 exactly?
How did they get to 30? Even if you take the defensive touchdown off the board. How did they get to 23 then?
They fumbled punt on the on the Seattle side of the field. They had the deep ball cup. I mean, the thing the Packers really have to be worried about, hey, we're beating this game to death, but the thing the Packers have to be worried about is sort of how Big Ben went about his business in the last game and a half of the regular season for Pittsburgh. We're not going to get anywhere going 6 yards at a time. We're not that efficient. We're not that precise. We have to go down the field. And, when they hit that big one to Cup the other day against Seattle, it sort of turned it around a little bit because, Goff was not going to be able to complete 5 balls in a row. He's going to have to hit one downfield. I don't know if they're equipped to do that, but if I'm coaching the Rams, that's kind of how I deploy. I try for big chunks in the passing game through play action because they're just not good enough, I think, to actually have a methodical drive through the air. And I just can't see that happening, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a good point in the chat here too. If the Rams hit their team total, it's something similar where there's a strip sack or something where they get plus territory, and then you don't need that much more. You need 2 or 3 good balls from Goff the rest of the day.
Okay. So only action I'm going to end up with this is some Aaron Jones player props. It sounds like some Dylan player props. It sounds like any under on Goff passing yards. Maybe it's probably gonna be pretty low.
Yeah. What do you think that line will be like?
Over on Goff fumbles. How about that?
If they give us that,
maybe
highest, lowest scoring teams of the weekend. Do we have any? Who's chalk for lowest scoring team of the weekend?
It's got to be the Rams.
Got to be the Rams.
This is the lowest total by far. It has to be the Rams at 19.5. Yeah.
Cleveland,
all right.
Some people will say Cleveland, but the total on that game is 57. They're expecting Cleveland to at least score some points.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, probably chalks out.
Okay. Should we move on? And it's okay that we spent so much time on that game because we didn't talk about the Packers last week, and I can pretty much tell you guarantee we're going to spend as much time on Browns Chiefs, but we can't give short shrift to potentially the game of the week, which is the Ravens at the Bills. Now, I have a lot of equity in the Ravens winning this game from a future standpoint. I would like to see them beat the Bills and go on to the AFC title game. And I was hesitant in getting involved with Ravens last week because I didn't love the way they matched up against the Titans defense, right? It was strength on strength. It was weakness on weakness. And it was like, man, the way you beat this Titans team is you go out there and you pick apart their secondary because they stink. And that's the one, quarterback to wide receiver, that's the one area where the Ravens just are not comfortable. And they couldn't really do it. They tried a little early and then they figured out, you know what? We're going to have to do this the hard way. We're just going to be ourselves. We're going to run, we're going to wait for Lamar to break some superhuman plays and, hope that our defense steps up. And their defense stepped up. And granted, a lot of that was aided by the poor decision-making of Mike Vrabel. This has been covered ad nauseum, and it is so fair. And not just Mike Vrabel, but future hot candidate Art Smith came in with probably one of the less inspiring offensive game plans we've seen in a while. And it was so predictable. It was you sitting on your couch, you're like, okay, this is coming next. This is coming next. Okay, Art Smith is building up for a big play action on first down. Okay, it's first half is winding down. He's probably going to try it now. Ravens even knew it. Guy gets his hands up, blocks the ball. Everybody knew what was going on in that game. It was uninspired. All that said, Ravens defense still played up. I don't know that the Ravens defense matches up as well against the Bills as they do against the Titans. And you brought it up in the intro. Bills are Kansas City light, right? And Kansas City regular, Kansas City heavy, absolutely hangs it on this Ravens defense because they're aggressive and they feed into that aggressiveness in ways that completely expose them downfield. And I don't 100% know what the Ravens defensive strategy is coming in here to stop the Bills. But let's start on this side of the ball. And I'm going to put the onus on you, Eric, as offensive strategist for the Bills. If you have Josh Allen and these weapons and you're going up against the Ravens defense, what is it that you do to get the most out of your guys? Because I got to tell you, on the other side of things, I see the Ravens getting points in this one.
Yeah, so the interesting thing, I'm pulling up my scheme clustering thing, and that the Chiefs and the Bills are about a percentage point different from each other, or like less than. They're basically the same number of men against the box against, right? So they spread teams out equally. They have basically the Chiefs use a little bit less 11 personnel. The average depth of target's about a tenth of a yard away. Play action rate's about the same percentage, and they run the same sort of like inside outside zone type of stuff. The one thing that Kansas City does a little bit better, they do it about twice as much, is they run motion almost 2/3 of the time, whereas Buffalo is about a third to 2/5 of the time. But other than that, I mean, they're the Spider-Man meme in the sense that both quarterbacks, really like to sort of like, there's the down payment that is the 1-2-3 quick game where Diggs, Beasley, Gabriel Davis, and John Brown get open in 2.5 seconds. I mean, everybody makes fun of the Cole Beasley All-Pro vote, but he was the 9th most valuable wide receiver in football per our WAR metric. Like he doesn't make mistakes, and he gets open, and he does a ton of positive things. So there's that. And then there's the scramble stuff that really only Mahomes and Josh Allen do with that aplomb. The Ravens defense is very different than some of these other teams' defenses. The Ravens attack you. Last season, it was crazy, the graph that they produced, which was, if you look at number of rushers versus time to throw by the opponent, the Ravens brought the most rushers in football, but the time to throw by their opponent was actually about league average, which means they're so good in coverage that they can make the quarterback pat the ball even after bringing a ton of players. That's a little bit worse this year without Earl. It's a little bit worse this year with, I think, down years out of Marlon Humphrey, Jimmy Smith being injured somewhat. No Brandon Carr, who I think, I kind of consider Brandon Carr the Shane Battier of the NFL. He always seems to be on good defenses, even though he doesn't have the best metrics or anything. So in that case, like the Ravens play risky on defense. They send people, they play man coverage a ton, and they hope that you can make a mistake. And with Allen, part of me says he hasn't made a ton of mistakes this year. He's daggered people significantly. But the other part of me says he's second in the NFL in turnover-worthy plays, like total. And we saw that last week against Indianapolis, where he took that inexplicable sack.
Oh, my God.
Almost gave the game away, right? Like, to me,
one of the worst sacks in NFL playoff history I've ever seen.
Yeah, right. But
the ball just kept going.
He's so good at the positive stuff, though. His average depth of target's 8.8 yards. That's that's pretty phenomenal. Almost 30% of his throws are positively graded by us. Only Tannehill and Watson are better. And almost 6% of his throws are big time. So he's generating a ton of offense. And so for me, if you're going to be on the Buffalo side, which I think I am at -2.5, you have to think, okay, this is Chiefs light, and Chiefs, that formula is the way in which to beat Baltimore, which is to use more motion. That would be what I would do if I were them. Use more motion, but also just believe that the guys that you spent a decent amount of money on can win in 2.5 seconds or less, and Allen can get rid of the football.
Chiefs more like Chiefs ice. Like the way that defense is going to come at you, the way Wink will do that, and just if you do pressure him, like, doesn't it feel like it just turns into a high variance game based on what
Sure.
he is? Like, he's
with a little higher alcohol content. Sure.
Well, no, I mean he's a little bit of Rodgers in that sense, where he's Rodgers with risk. Like Rodgers is like you've mentioned for years and years, like throwing the ball away. He's quick. He's fine doing that. But also at the same time, sometimes you drive Rodgers out of the pocket and it's like, shit. Well, that was like especially when you're looking at it from the TV angle and you can see it in real time from that. It's like, collapsing the pocket on him was a very bad idea because now he's just standing 10 yards to his right. He's still just looking and he's going to cock back and hit somebody deep. You get that. It's like the good with the bad. Like Allen's not the throwaway quarterback. He's not going to throw the ball away like Rodgers. But at the same time, if you're going to come at him with blitzes and miss, it's going to go poorly.
Okay. I can see how the Bills score points in this one. I really don't think the Ravens do this the same way they did it against the Titans for sure. I don't think they win with defense. I think they win with offense if they win. And honestly, I love this matchup for them. In the same way that last week was strength on strength, weakness on weakness, and they would had to been uncomfortable to really take advantage of the opposing defense's soft spots. This one, they can just be themselves, and it matches up well with the way you want to attack this Bills defense. Now, if you can get some of these guys into the second level, the tackling from the Bills in the linebacking safeties has been brutal this year. Anyone who backed the Bills and watched the comeback there by the Colts was probably thinking like, there's guys everywhere. Why? How in the hell is Nyheim Hines running amok down the field into this? What is happening here? And similarly, they have a little bit of speed, which matches what you want against Lamar, but the tackling and the angles they take and just in general, the softness of that defense and the yardage they give up from a running standpoint is a problem. And I've heard you make this point before, and I think it's brilliant. Sean McDermott invites the run. He invites it, and it makes total sense because guess what? There's like 30 something teams in the NFL that have negative EPA per rush, but there's one that has a big fucking positive number, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. And if you invite it, and if you're giving them the opportunity to put your guys on the spot to make tackles and to make stops, I'm not concerned really about the Ravens getting theirs in this one. And similarly, if you ask me what is the one kind of subset of passing plays that I am the most confident Lamar Jackson will be able to execute with perfection, it is tight ends up the seam or just decent reads over the middle of the field to the slot corner, slot wide receiver. And for whatever reason, Buffalo stinks covering that. For whatever reason, they cannot do a good job of shutting down the tight end in the seam. So that as a safety valve being available to convert third and longs is exciting. But I don't even know how many third and longs they're going to have to convert. And I don't know how this team stops the Ravens when the Ravens get into the red zone. I guess the one factor I have my eye on is
huge.
Yeah, and the one thing I have my eye on is the weather. Obviously, like if this is a weather game, I'm feeling like all bets are kind of off in terms of the handicap. Yeah. So we'll just assume that percentage of snow likelihood is coming down, wind is coming down. Let's assume that it's not a weather game for the purpose of this discussion. Andy, do you have a feel as to I guess. How are you feeling?
I hope it's.
Are you nervous? Are you nervous? Because I was more nervous last week. In all honesty,
you're always nervous. I never get nervous because it doesn't affect the outcome of the game. I think snow may be an advantage too for I think maybe both offenses, but the Ravens again. I like a slick surface for an offense. I'm fine with that. Mark Andrews, that's a guy that's tough to tackle. I'd love to see him get like 10 targets. Obviously, the Ravens are more than happy to do that and accommodate that as well. But remember how Jamal Adams looked last week? And then after the game, and this happens every year in week 17 or when they get out of the playoffs, you find like, oh yeah, guess what? My shoulder was really screwed up, or I'm getting surgery right now. And that's why I looked like I didn't want to tackle anybody. There's like 6 guys that looked like that on the Bills team in the second half. I don't know if we're going to find out they're all injured or they just stink, but that's not gonna work out against this team that does have success running, not only running with multiple running backs, but running designed runs with their quarterback, designing running impromptu runs with their quarterback, and then we'll just it's not a finesse over the top. We're not talking about the Trey on Hollywood matchup, are we? That's
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
I guess slight detour to narrative town here.
I'll take it.
The Bills peaked too early. The Bills put too many other good plays on film over the last
8-0
half.
against the spread in the last 8 weeks of the season. Obviously, 0-1 in the playoffs. Very Baltimorean last year.
Yeah, very. You know exactly where I was going with that. Exactly where I was going with that.
Yeah, they
Bills
peak. They peaked like week 13.
They peaked too early. They beat up on some good teams. They looked unfreaking touchable on offense. They get into the playoffs and they got a big home playoff game on Saturday night, divisional weekend. I mean, there's some parallels that are narrative-y.
And Allen hasn't played a poor game in a long time. I mean, that was the thing with Lamar too. You perturbed Lamar even a little bit against the Titans last year, and they had really not. I mean, they had no chance of winning that game from basically quarter 2 on. I will say this. So, I mean, Drew, I think you bring up a great point. The Buffalo Bills, they have one player in their front seven that has had more than like 50 snaps this year that grades above average as a run defender for us. It's not only by design, it's also they're not good at it. And that was the impetus, the nose tackles article I read. It was literally because I was watching them deploy this against Kansas City on that makeshift Monday night game where they played too high and they said, we're going to let Clyde Edwards-Helaire beat us. And he did. They ran for 245 yards. And I go back and look, and they're just getting railroaded in the run game. And I wonder, so here's the question I have, because this is how I would approach this game if I'm Buffalo's defense. Hollywood Brown accounts for 33%, or he did going into the week. I actually think this goes up after the playoffs. He accounts for about a third of all the air yards that Lamar Jackson puts out there.
That sounds fair.
So the Bills are very good at their number one cornerback position. They are like extremely talented in the secondary, and their linebackers cover okay. Do you deploy a more run? Because last week's game, I have to look at the numbers, but last week's game they were conceding the run. And it was working in the first half because Rivers wasn't converting late downs. When Rivers started converting late downs, then it went poorly. Lamar's a player I want in late downs, right? Like, he's not an efficient passer when you don't have the layups to the tight end and all that stuff. The problem is getting to those late downs, and I'm just not sure that if they play defense the way they traditionally do, whether they're able to tackle enough players to get to even 3rd and 5. Every once in a while. I mean, they're going to need what inevitably does happen, but might not in a small sample, which is holding penalties, runs of 1 yard or more, that drop passes on early downs. Like, they need those to survive on defense. And while those are relatively common in the NFL, in a small sample size, that's how favorites lose in a small sample event like one game.
Hey, Andy, let me pose you a question here. Let's go back in time to week 10 of the NFL.
I'm there.
You remember a game we bet an over on that was a dead nut over and was just a brutal sweat? It was the Buffalo Bills hosting the Arizona Cardinals hosting the Buffalo Bills.
My God.
Mobile quarterback Kyler Murray in that game, the Bills had no answer. No answer whatsoever. And in fact, if it wasn't for the anti-genius of Cliff Kingsbury's red zone, if his red zone abject failure, that was kind of the characteristic that defined that team this year, that game is a runaway for the Cardinals. I've heard a lot of people bring that up and be like, hey, that's their only loss.
They got their Hail Mary.
Yeah,
they should have won that game.
Cardinals team,
yeah.
Do you want to guess off the top of your head how many yards of offense that Cardinals team had?
Oh, I'm going to guess really high. 523.
It was almost 500. It was 453 yards of offense in that game, and they settled for field goals inside the red zone 3-4 times. It was a weird game from an execution standpoint, but I got to tell you, the Bills defense had no answer for a mobile quarterback in Kyler Murray in that example. If you want to look at the one other team the Bills played that had anywhere close to the same EPA per play on the ground that the Ravens had, it was the Tennessee Titans week 4. And they scored 42 points. 42 points. They rolled them. And I know that Tannehill is a much better passer than Lamar, and that was a combined effort that they put on that number on the Bills. But I'm substantially less concerned about.
You know who doesn't trot their opera singing kicker out there for 22-yard field goals?
Is it John Harbaugh?
John Harbaugh, yeah. No, Cliff. That is Cliff's, just his poison apple right now is absolutely loving to settle for field goals inside the 5, inside the 10.
Take the points, man. Take the points. The points are free.
They're free. They're taken. What was your free?
Just ask the Colts.
Just take them. They're free.
They're
free.
That's great. Speaking of, I mean, are we missing an easy over then at 50?
I think that has to be the play because I think both. It sounds like you guys like Baltimore, which I understand. I still think offense win. Like I'm betting on the better offense here with Buffalo. But all the things that you guys said, do resonate, and it does give me pause. Especially if we get a bad Josh Allen game, all bets are off at that point. But I do think like. The issue with the Ravens is the way that they play. If anybody had that over, I know a bunch of sharps hammered the under in that Tennessee game. If you have an over in that game and they have the ball first, like you're at 6.5 minutes by the time their first possession's over, and you're like, oh shit, this is not going well. So you're really
they almost made it last week with the Bills. If that drive gets a little further, that over hits last week, even though it was like 3-0 with a couple minutes to play.
That's the thing. You're basically banking on it being a Buffalo-like game and not a Baltimore-like game.
Yeah,
if you're betting
great
over.
Great point. Andy, secret pod play. Baltimore Ravens team total. Baltimore, man. Baltimore's team total takes a bad Josh Allen game out of the mix. It's gonna be a juicy 23.5. You got any appetite for that?
I'll take a 24. Give me 24. Okay. See if nobody lets you sell that shit. Maybe someone does.
I don't know anywhere. But okay. All right. Keep that in the hopper until the end. Let's move on to the most interesting handicap from.
We're both clicking the banner at the same time.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Eric's Kansas City Chiefs, unbeatable team, just a juggernaut of a football team.
Put that evil on them.
These guys cannot lose. They can't lose. It has been something to behold to watch them go and win a championship last week and have the focus and the intensity and come back in the season after all of these young men win their first ever NFL championship and go, wall to wall, 100% effort, throttle just dog shit teams. And wait a second. They've won. They've won a lot of games, and they are clearly the best team in the NFL. I will not dispute that. They are clearly the highest power rated team in the NFL. I will not dispute that. I don't think you can reasonably hang a line shorter than 3 points against any other team going into Kansas City and have confidence. That said, they are vulnerable. And in particular, I wonder what is going on over the last half of the season, not just with their offense in general, but with young Mr. Patrick Mahomes in his performance specifically. I've seen some very smart people and heard some very smart people make some very interesting breakdowns, notably over the last half of the season, in some part due to weaknesses across this offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs. Mahomes is taking more sacks. He's converting third downs at a lower clip. His EPA per pass is pedestrian over the last 4 games of his last 4 starts. They get played to a draw at home by the Atlanta Falcons. They needed coin flippy first down conversions at the end of a game against the Buccaneers and the Saints, which they utterly dominated. Otherwise, they still needed those first down conversions at the end of the game, so they didn't have to give the other team the ball back and put their suspect defense back out on that field. There are warning signs galore about this Kansas City Chiefs team that I cannot get over. Even though I fully support that they're the best team in the NFL and they ought to be the proverbial favorites to win the title this year. And shoot, if they look good in this game, if they shake off the rust and pull out the good plays and throttle this suspect defense that is the Browns, it's not going to be a huge shock. And reasonably, why can't they repeat, against a better in a tougher path than they had last year? I can entirely see it happening. That said, what are some of the things in the back of your head that give you confidence that Andy Reid can turn this thing around on a dime, given that we really haven't seen them put together a complete performance since like week 3?
You kind of got him in the box. Jesus.
Well, I mean, look, I do this thing where I do scheme uniqueness stuff, and I look over and I try to
absolutely love it.
I try to figure out when Andy Reid is calling the good plays, and he does. There's evidence that he calls the good plays in games that matter. So last 2 years, peaks in week 3 against the Ravens, dissipates, and then revs back up in the playoffs. But the Kansas City Chiefs have significant weaknesses. One of them is Mitchell Schwartz is their 4th best player on offense. He hasn't played since week 6. Mike Remmers is the right tackle, and they're happy to have Remmers, because he's been injured over the last month of the season. Eric Fisher's finally back to being, I think, healthy. They get a little bit of a break with Olivier Vernon being hurt for Cleveland this week. And one of the low key things, and I can't remember if I read that he was out there today or not, but when Sammy Watkins doesn't play, it's a different offense. He is an expensive player who's overpaid, but he does serve a purpose as far as taking the top off the defense. So there are weaknesses there. I come back to this though. What is the case? Can somebody make a positive case for Cleveland to cover this number?
Yes.
Every case for Cleveland I've heard so far has been a poking holes in Kansas City's, veneer, right? Has been, hey, here's where Kansas City's let us down. And look, they're 0-7-1 the last 8 on the betting market. I get it. We're all a little bit jaded by them, right? I had an alt minus 6.5 against New Orleans. I was pissed.
You and me both. I'm still not over.
And I had them minus the points against Carolina. There have been games where they just were not. They were not interested in how much that game meant to me financially. They just weren't. But when I look at this game and I say, okay, how is Cleveland going to win this football game, or how is Cleveland going to cover this number? Let's say. Every case that I can make is a -1 against Kansas City. And is it just observation bias at this point?
It might be.
And everything we've talked about was Mahomes and, the offensive line injuries and Sammy Watkins and the good plays and the offense. We haven't even gotten, if you flip to the other side of the field, I think maybe that's where you can make a positive case for Cleveland. I don't know if teams have properly attacked this defense. It's not a good defense. It's not the defense we saw last year that, I guess you could speak more to this about how they whipped themselves into shape. And some of it was just some of the moves they made during the 2019 season that started to work, the pieces that started to fit in. This defense hasn't been great. And I think it's not stop the Kansas City high flying offense. I think if you cover this 10, it's track meet style, and it's getting both these running backs going. It's getting Baker going, keeping Baker clean. I think the offensive line injuries are maybe the biggest thing in this game, not only for both teams. I think the way that Mahomes has had this propensity to take 11-yard sacks, and the way that Cleveland's offensive line is down 3 spots in certain positions at this point, it's going to be super important to get either one of these pass rushes going, to keep one of these offenses. Punts will be at a premium if you can get pressure on either of these guys. I think it's a win. You just took essentially. What's your EPA on a drop back for either team right now?
Okay,
I have Mahomes full season at 0.27. I have Mayfield at 0.14. but Mayfield's been the third highest graded quarterback in the NFL since week 7, trailing only
If you had second half of that, like Brady. Yeah.
I mean, I'll push back a little bit on the Kansas City stuff as defensively because they're basically the same components. I mean, Frank Clark got some high-profile sacks last year, but most of them were after 3 seconds. The sack on Garoppolo to close the Super Bowl was after 3.5 seconds. Frank Clark's not good. Like he wasn't good last year. He's not good this year. He does set a decent edge in the run game. And Derek Nottie, their defensive tackle that they drafted a few years ago, is a pretty stout player there. Chris Jones can offer heat inside, and L'Jarius Sneed is one of the most valuable rookie defensive players in the NFL right now. So and add that to Matthew. I do think there are some mismatches where they struggle against athletic tight ends, but I don't see they're like the thing the Chiefs have going for them is they struggle against the Raiders, they struggled against the Chargers, they struggle against teams with really athletic tight ends, but the 3 best tight ends in football, Kittle and Waller, are out of the playoffs, and the best tight end in football plays for them. So they don't really have this mismatch with like Daniel Sorensen locked up against somebody who's far superior to him athletically. I think their defense is actually fine. I think they do it really. I think I think Spagnuolo does a good job. And in the run game, they're a better version, in my opinion, of what Buffalo tries to do. They're a better version of what Indianapolis tries to do. And you know, they've only really been stretched out. Like the Atlanta game was their offense playing like crap. It wasn't like they gave up one big play to Ridley, but that's an explosive offense. I mean, Tampa gave up 20, 27, 28 points to that team in the 2 weeks that sandwiched the Chiefs game. Like,
great point.
You know, and that's what gives me hope about the Chiefs is like the offense is the easiest, switch, right? Everything else requires you to kind of put pieces together to be successful. The Chiefs kind of are fine at those like sort of more weak link systems. It's really, can Mahomes and Reed put 3 good games together? And I'm bullish on that to some degree. The defense and all that kind of stuff, the bar is low for them to begin with, like get 3 stops a game. And the offense to me is where they make their big bet. And there's something to the fact that their road opponents this year, the ones that weren't in the AFC West, were something like 85-15 against teams not named Kansas City, and the Chiefs went 5-0 against them. Like,
no, they were tested. There's no doubt.
They were
tested.
We talked about that earlier. The Tampa New Orleans games, like they covered those games essentially. They beat 2 really good teams on the road.
They still needed some coin flippy shit at the end to get those wins, man.
Yeah. And also, I will not stand for Austin Hooper slander. He's not top 3, but he's top 10.
Everyone has Super Bowl experience. Kelsey is trash. Anyway, let me ask you though. Last year, Kansas City's defense from week 14 through the Super Bowl was what percentile? 69th, 84th.
Yeah, like 70th percentile. I mean, the knock against that, they were only second in points. They were pretty good in points allowed, right down the stretch.
They were great. Yeah, no, they were great. I thought they were absolutely better than average, no doubt. And kind of in that sort of 70 to 84th range, I would guess. Yeah. Where are they right now?
I think the Chiefs defense is probably 60th percentile in the NFL. Okay.
So a little downgrade relative to last year at this time. A little downgrade.
You take the Chiefs. So these are the teams they faced after the bye last year: Oakland, New England, Denver, Chicago, and the LA Chargers, all kind of below average. Like the schedule narrative, like the thing that I was worried about going into the playoffs as a Chiefs fan was, their defense is playing better. And like there are media members in the KC market that are like, the Chiefs defense carried them in the second half last year. I'm like, are you like?
Well, it got better, and that's why the media talked about it. But they have an offense.
That's crazy. Yeah. Okay. But we agree that they're this year they're a little downgrade relative to last year.
Tested, right? So like down the stretch this year, you're talking about a much better post-bye again. You're talking about a much better Vegas offense. Tampa, Denver, not good. But then Dolphins, Saints, Falcons, Chargers, those are all really good offenses. And yeah, you're giving up probably 50 to 60 more yards per game, but you're not the reason. Like, I don't think their defense was, the Miami game, they turned the ball over. They've turned the ball over 4 times that game. They were -4 in turnover differential, one, probably should have covered. Their offense was really the reason they struggled against Denver. Offense really the reason they struggled against the Falcons.
Let's hang on that for a second, because I agree. I think that the Kansas City defense kept them in position where they won that game, no doubt. And honestly, the way the offense played, and the fact that they should have probably turned it over in the end. Mahomes should have turned it over in the end zone on what ended up being the game-winning drive. That doesn't happen, they probably lose that game, right? Or if Terrell comes away with the pick, they probably lose that game. But I thought the defense kept them in that game for sure. What interests me about that game specifically was the way that Atlanta defended Mahomes, because it was almost a culmination of a lot of the defensive approaches that teams threw against Mahomes, starting at halftime of the Tampa Bay game through the remainder of his starts. And the best way I can characterize it is you stop blitzing him, put the safeties up high, take away the home run, right? Literally turn him into the New York Yankees, where he's either striking out or hitting a home run every time. Well, you take away the home run and he strikes out a lot. Right. And granted, he didn't have a running game, so they were asking him to convert long third downs at a little higher frequency. That put a little more pressure on him. But just, stopping the blitz and, putting more guys in the secondary so that your 1v1s aren't getting exposed was effective. The Falcons blitzed 25% of downs, dropbacks in that game. In general, that 25% of blitz rate, that was pretty consistent across all this entire sample. And if you look at what Cleveland is on defense, it's really freaking similar. That's kind of who they are. They don't blitz very much. 25% is about right for them. So I think as long as Cleveland's defense just kind of does what they do, they may be the worst possible matchup for Mahomes. And it's crazy to say that, but you look at their schedule this year and who he has struggled to really, move the ball effectively against. And it's a lot of those kind of teams. Now, could this be like a Raiders sort of game where, it literally is, team with the ball last wins? It's possible, but I can see an outcome here where this is a defensive game. And if you can get you're going to get Ward back, you're going to get a couple more players in the secondary coming off the COVID list, I believe. And, to the degree that you can put Ward on Tyreek Hill and, figure out some plan for, I don't know if there's a plan to stop Kelsey, which is probably the problem. Like every third and medium or third and short is probably an automatic conversion. But, I do think there is a potential that, and again, Chiefs may roll out the good plays. Although Andy Reid, with time to prepare, if he comes out with a trick play where someone not named Pat Mahomes throws a pass in this game, I'm gonna throw something.
You're gonna live bet the Browns. Drew,
live bet the Browns. The thing too, Ward. What do we know on Ward's? If I'm coming off some sort of leg injury, I think the last thing I want to do is cover Tyreek Hill.
He's coming off COVID list.
Well, didn't he have? Hasn't he been fighting a calf injury earlier in the year?
I think that's fine.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if that's 1,000%. You got to run pretty effing fast. Either way, I
don't think you ask him to do it by himself, though. You keep the safeties back.
Keep the
safeties back, and because so much of the damage that Mahomes does is long after the snap. He drops back a country mile. And the two most dangerous Mahomes plays where I'm against him and I'm like, my stomach drops. Like you see him drop way back and you see the defense blitzing, you're screwed. Home run's coming, it. When he rolls out to his right, he is so devastating at either blowing you up downfield or getting a 20-yard run down the sidelines. You're helpless. That the first down's converted, right? Or they're going to score a touchdown, one or the other, right? And I think if you can avoid those two situations, there's no reason that you can't do a damn good Atlanta Falcons imitation if you're the Browns defense in this game.
Yeah, Drew, like I think you're spot on about the blitz stuff. Mahomes has been blitzed 145 times this year. He's only been pressured on those blitzes 4 times.
Crazy. That's
9.3 yards per pass attempt, 16 touchdowns, 1 interception. When not blitzed, he's still pretty damn good, 99.8 quarterback rating. But he actually scrambles more when not blitzed as a percentage of his dropbacks than when blitzed. That is probably, where if I'm Kansas City, I look at this and I say, okay, Pat, you're going to have to be disciplined and take what the defense gives you. And if I'm Cleveland, I say, you just don't blitz Mahomes. Like, it's a recipe for disaster.
Okay, so let's say that Browns do their best defensively and they somewhat limit the Chiefs. Does 57 make for an underplay? I learned my lesson the hard way last year. I can't get involved in an under in this spot because honestly,
we were opposite on the Texans game.
We were opposite on the Texans game. If the Browns score first, if the Browns score first twice, they might as well make the live total infinity. They might as well.
Yeah, because at 75.
And so I'm not taking any part of this under, even though I cannot make this game 57. I can't make this game 10 either.
That's my question about the 10 real quick. And this has been bouncing around my brain all day. And we haven't I don't do a whole lot with this. I know you do some work with this with NBA stuff, but we're with our power ratings, we can't make this a 10. We can't make it 10. Like, they should not be favored by this much with no matter what you want to do with the bye, what you want to do with home field. Neither of us can get to 10, but is a 10 really a 10 when you have these offenses, when you have this total? Like, does it lose some value when the total's fucking 60?
I guess, how do they cover 10? Let me ask you that. Right? Because I agree, you're right. I do think the 10 loses some. Yeah, you're right. The points and the points you got from 7.5 to 10, are they meaningful? Probably not. No. But like, let's say that this is a 10-point game in the second half. Chiefs are down 10 and they have the ball and it's third quarter, fourth quarter. If you laid the points with the Chiefs, Eric, are you feeling good right now? Like, what do you think happens? Stefanski and, this team lining up, Baker Mayfield is down 2 scores. Like, are you, and his offensive line is pretty banged up. Are you thinking, okay, here comes the pressure, Chris Jones, Frank Clark are going to get after him. They're going to force him into a mistake. Like, this is where we take the ball.
Maybe like, that's been how the Chiefs have closed these close games out, right? Is these
Sure.
So here's how I bet the game. As somebody, like, look, I don't think 10's weird because I don't. To your point, Andy, the total is 57. We talked about this with Rufus on that podcast too. The from 7 to 14, like, none of those numbers have really any they're a percent or 2 each, like, maybe, and way less at 57. The way that I bet this game, partially as a fan, but also partially because I think this is how the game is going to go out, is I'm doing alts. I actually have some Kansas City minus 13.5 as an alt. Because I think, I don't think there's a ton of value in 10, 11, 12, 13. Look, and not to say if you like Cleveland, don't, take, 10. But as somebody who likes Kansas City, I don't think the laying the 10 really has any more, I don't think that the value difference is all that much different than laying 10 versus laying 13.5. So that's kind of what I've done. I think that this game is either a field goal game or it's a 10 field goal game.
I was just going to say, it could be the same way if you feel the other way where, take your 10 if you want, take your 10, don't sell, certainly don't buy points to 10.5, but do the opposite and take some Cleveland plus 7.
Would you believe
plus 3.5? Get weird with it.
Yeah. Would you believe or parlay Cleveland money line in the over, which I did like an idiot earlier this week when I was thinking that was their only path to victory.
Clemson, right? That was
exactly.
And not to say that this is getting close to college football, but that's kind of how college football is. It's there's not that there's not that many key numbers in college football anymore, and the totals are
12 quarterbacks.
Eric, as the Chiefs. Eric, as the podcast noted Chiefs historian, what was the margin of victory in the last Chiefs game that closed with a total of 57?
57. Would that have been the AFC Championship game from 2018?
No, it would not.
Oh,
It
no.
is
It was
further
the
back
first
than that.
New England
It
game
was
that
the
year.
Azteca game, wasn't it?
Further back than that. The Azteca
First
game
New England
closed
game
at
that
like
year?
60 or something crazy. What's that?
First New England game that year?
Nope. Further back, even than that.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Okay. Are we even further? Are we like Trent Green era then?
Was it
2004.
So
Oh my
Trent,
God.
so that was that like the Drew Bennett breakout game? Titans, Colts,
God.
Titans, Chiefs.
Chiefs, Colts.
Okay. Oh,
57 was the closing total.
Manning?
oh, this
Margin.
is going on to the AFC playoffs, right?
This is it was week 8. It was Halloween, 2004. Chiefs, Colts. Closing total was 57. The margin of victory was Chiefs by 10.
Wow. Okay.
For fuck's sakes.
Well, that was because the Chiefs Colts played in January of 2004. Neither team. I don't think either team punted. Maybe it was just the Colts that didn't punt. But that was the year the Chiefs were 13-3, got the bye, and the Colts steamed them in the playoffs. Chiefs put up a fight, but I think it was multiple scores at the end there. So okay, that's a lot. I remember distinctly being on the other
45-35 in that game.
Yeah. I remember the New England Kansas City game, the first matchup in 18 having a pretty high total, but it wasn't 57, I guess.
It was massive. Yeah, that one was big. I'll tell you what it was.
And I think you're right. The Azteca game close to like 60.
It was like almost 60. Yeah, that one was way there.
So.
Okay, Andy, how are you approaching this one? Did you make a bet on this one?
Browns?
Did you bet him, Marty? Oh, you're in?
No,
you're in?
We talked. We liked the 10 early. What the question I posed was my second thought. Is 10 all that valuable? And I think I might approach it like I had laid out, where maybe I'll just go some smaller bets on Browns +7, Browns +3.5, Browns team total over. Maybe Browns team total over is a better approach to betting the Browns because it takes the Mahomes hitting Reek a couple times over the top out of it. In fact, if he were to score, it would probably help the Browns team total because they get the ball back faster.
Yeah, got to keep an eye on the Browns offensive line injuries if you're going to get involved in that too.
And that's the thing too. We're sitting here on Wednesday. We don't have complete information on the outside of the Rams. This is the most injuries to watch. Those Rams and Browns are kind of the bad ones for things to keep an eye on for the next couple days as we get to the weekend.
Whereas the Chiefs you're talking about 3 games off, decent amount of injuries down the stretch for them on the offensive side of the ball. Most come back except for possibly, I think Schwartz is out, but
I think you kind of know on a lot of those. It's like Green Bay, like who's in and out. I don't think Schwartz is back either.
No, he's not even on those. They would have activated him and put him in the practice field, I think. Just to close the loop, Kansas City, New England in 2018, the first time they played in the regular season, that total closed at 59.5. That was a big number, and it was not close. It went well over.
That game was not going over because Mahomes threw a bunch of red zone interceptions, and then it just turned, man. It was like a couple of those games that year where I was like, I remember texting my friend who's a radio show host in KC saying they're going to win a Super Bowl pretty soon here because I was like, they're losing a lot of these games in like heartbreaking, like the Rams game, the New England game, even like the Chargers game, the Seahawks game. All the games they lost that year were sort of in this like you're messed around too much and you lost. And like last year in the playoffs, they messed around, but they ended up sort of overcoming that. This will be a really interesting game for the franchise because like they went all in on winning a second Super Bowl and they're getting the easiest opponent they could imagine, I think, in round 1. I think the Colts are a better side than Cleveland even. This is a huge game. I mean, I would say it's a pretty disappointing year if you lose to Cleveland in the spot. Yeah,
no, I think so. But at the same time, again, Cleveland Browns defense, their DNA is real close to Raiders, Falcons, Texans, Lions. These are all teams that really gave Kansas City a hard time in the last 2 years.
I wouldn't say the Raiders defense gave them a hard time.
No, that's true. The
Raiders offense certainly did. So.
That's true. They should have beat them twice, probably, right?
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on. Final game of the weekend. We have Buccaneers, the Buckaroos head to New Orleans, round 3 of the divisional matchup between the Tampa Bay Bucks and the New Orleans Saints, the oldest ever quarterback matchup of all time, I'm assuming by about 30 years, but that's just off the top of my head.
Not quite. There was
Really?
a George Blanda
Really?
Johnny Unitas game where they're 43-37.
Wow. That's some good trivia. That's
Yeah,
so this
this
is still the oldest, but not by much.
Yeah, oh yeah, this is the old. I couldn't find anyone with 2 older quarterbacks.
Mm.
I just started looking through George Blanda games to see who he played.
Mm.
There's only one quarterback with more passing yards in the playoffs over the age of 40 than actual passing yards over the age of 40. It was Josh McCown last year. Got in that game for Philly and threw for like 170, and he had like 20 yards after the age of 40. So I was helping somebody with like some of that trivia, Andy, and I was like, there's the majority of passing yards over 40 in the playoffs have been produced by one Tom Brady.
And that was only I looked only at Blanda playoff games, which George Blanda played in a ton of playoff games because eventually he was just a kicker too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he played till he was like 56. So, but yeah, old man. We've seen the History Channel meme that was pretty funny. Like that they're having fun with it. It is, we might look back at this and say these were some of the best quarterbacks we've seen in our generation, and we didn't get these the Manning and the Manning Brady ones that we had seemingly a couple times a year for a long time. And these it's kind of neat that they got to play each other 3 times now, being in the same division. We got what was the first game? The first game
was in New Orleans week 1, and realistically, the Saints lose that game if they don't win the turnover battle 3-0.
And then the second game was very bad. And by very bad, hilarious, because we both bet on the Saints in different ways. And it was, there's nothing like cashing a team total in like the second, early in the second quarter. But I don't think that was obviously indicative of the Bucs gave me a lot of trouble in the middle of the year, because not only because of that game, but the Green Bay game as well, where they looked just dead on arrival. It was 10-0 like that. And then I don't think Green Bay scored again. They got this. They started showing. I don't know what they did with the pressure, but they started showing something that Rodgers couldn't handle, didn't like. All of a sudden, Rodgers turned into Jordan Love, and it was bad. And I shouldn't shit on Jordan Love. We haven't seen him play yet. He turned into his brother, like the other Rodgers, the reality show Rodgers. Jordan Rodgers. Yeah, are they all Jordans? Yeah, either way. The pressure Tampa put there, it just ruined. It really ruined the game. Like that game was gross from there on out. They just got stomped. So I've had a hard time grasping what Tampa is. And then early in the year, I had a hard time coming to terms with the New Orleans defense not being able to put it together. I was very upset. I know we talked about this with Rufus, some of the penalty yards, and I brought this up with Drew, and we went back kind of reminisce. Like they were getting nailed with just bad defensive penalties early in the season. Some of that's just bad luck variance. Some of it's, I don't know, getting wrong place, wrong time.
Sure.
I think the defenses are improved. And I mean, it's not the lowest total of the weekend because Goff is playing, but it's low. It's lower than I would have thought originally. I guess has this one been bet down? I haven't tracked this market much.
No, it's been bet up. It was 50. It's 50.
Yeah, now we're north of 51, even 52 almost, right?
Yeah. There is some enthusiasm for points in this one.
Here's one thing I'll say is about the difference between these two teams. I think the Saints are very robust defensively. Like there aren't places where you look and say this guy is exploitable. Tampa, I think, is very exploitable, and there might be things they do off of this, but when you look at Sean Murphy-Bunting, who's their nickel, it's really hard to give up more than 10 yards per catch when you play slot. But he's allowed 12.3 yards per catch, 83 targets into his coverage, 804 yards. He's given up 6 touchdowns, 3 penalties, and only 2 pass breakups. So the middle of the field there, again, a place where the Saints like to deploy receivers, obviously. That's a weak spot. And then the other one, people in Tampa are complaining about Devin White not making a Pro Bowl, so on and so forth. And he's been a part of 9 sacks, 31 pressures, second among linebackers. He's missed 16 tackles. He's given up 86 catches in coverage for 761 yards. He leads linebackers in yards given up in coverage by over 150 yards. So when I look at I think both teams have the same high-end defensive talent. I think the worst player on the Saints defense is far better than the worst player on the Bucs defense. And so if you're looking at this game and asking, why are the Saints -3? The quarterback for the Bucs is playing way better than the quarterback for the Saints. The weapons for the Bucs are a lot better than the weapons for the Saints, et cetera, et cetera. It's that. I think when you grade the players out, the weaknesses on Tampa's side and the disparity, I think, in the quality of the two head coaches is probably why people, the money's come in on Tampa, I think, from 3.5 to 3, but it's why it's still 3 and not, crossing that key.
We agree. Yeah.
I want like a box and whisker plot of the two defenses now. Like, that's what I had pictures. Just, I'm just picturing the overlap, and you're talking like if your floor is your weakest link, your bottom of the chain. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I like it, and obviously we mentioned off the top, like we all kind of agree, probably the worst coach. I don't know how I feel about Peyton sometimes, but he has, and maybe you have some stats to back this up, Eric. I feel like he's been more aggressive later in his career, but sometimes I feel it's like the Tomlin thing, where it's like, are you being aggressive because of analytics, or are you being aggressive just because you have a wild hair up your ass?
You want to be unpredictable.
Like, yeah, that one game where it's like, oh my God, this was last year where he went for like every 4th down right away in the game. It's like, what has got into this guy?
That Ravens game where the Justin Tucker extra point was why the game went under. That when they went for it,
we had an under, and he's going for every 4th down. Maybe that's why it's right here in my brain.
It for sure is.
Well, and that's where you have to be worried, where it's not the most analytically sound thing, because then you get what Vrabel did last week. Like Vrabel by doing the 12th man on the field thing against Houston, but he doesn't have models, so he doesn't know to go for it on 4th. Like, that's where you have to be worried, where I know teams like Buffalo and Baltimore are going for it on Indianapolis, are going for it on 4th down because their quants are in the booth saying this has an edge. Peyton's just like aggressive in his gut, but that's going to leave like some problems at the edge.
Yeah, he's a scattergun of aggressiveness, and I'd rather, I guess, I'm not saying like if it's a team I'm backing, it's a team I'm cheering for, it's a team I want to watch on TV, watching football. I'd rather have, the John Harbaugh. I'd rather have even Doug. People shit on Doug Peterson. Yeah, I got fired, but someone who is going to have that analytical approach, the aggressive approach to using the numbers to your advantage. But
he's tired of being told what to do, though. Man.
He is tired of being. But you know what? And you say, what's the polar opposite of that? And from a betting standpoint, it is Tomlin. Or if we think that's what Peyton is, it's a guy where he's not a known quantity. Like, I'd rather have a really stupid coach I know exactly, like, well, this he's going to kick the field goal. Like, I'd rather have
like
Gruden.
John McVay is a liability.
Give me Gruden. Like, he's going to punt, or Pete Carroll for the most part, especially when he gets bit. If he gets bitten on a 4th down, he's sending out one of the 2 kickers on the next one. I like having a known quantity rather than someone who has this just scattershot approach to aggressiveness on 4th downs.
Well, you want to bet the game. You don't want to coach the bet. It's like the Titans. It's sort of like, I'll bet the Titans all day if I can call their offense for them. But I have no idea what Arthur Smith's going to do. Like,
hey, man. Titans offense is so easy.
Titans offense. And there are games where he sits on 16 against a face card, and you're like, I can't do this. Like, I can't predict what's going to happen. So,
hey man, I watched the ESPN broadcast. Coaching the Titans offense is easy. You just wait for the 4th quarter, and then Derrick Henry does his thing and runs all over the place.
Well, you guys saw my tweets after their first drive, and I said, Because if the game was going to get out ahead and Titans were going to win by like 30 and Henry was going to get 200 yards, I was like, hey, Tannehill's the reason they're ahead right now. Like,
Of course.
I was like, I'm going to get out ahead of this nonsense, normalize giving Tannehill credit.
Yes.
But obviously the game didn't go that way.
That's the secret to success for a lot of the good running team. The Cleveland Browns, excellent running team. Guess what they do? They throw a lot on early downs early in the game. This isn't a surprise anymore. Like they're a smart team. No, I completely agree with this whole sentiment. And in fact, taking jump into the time capsule, we've gone back to 2018 a couple of times already in this podcast. We'll go back again. The Saints lost that title game in the Superdome with that, the last rocking home crowd Drew Brees is ever going to have in his life. They lost that title game because Sean Payton was not aggressive enough in the first half of that game. If he's more aggressive, they put them away in style, and they ride the crowd noise and disrupt Goff, and it is never close. It doesn't come down to overtime and needing Drew Brees to, come up with miracle throws, conversions, whatever to get a feel, and he turns the ball over. You don't have to worry about the ref calling the correct defensive pass interference, and you're I think our read on Peyton is correct, but ultimately I do think he's a better coach than Arians. I do think he's, as in terms of coming up with the script and play calling, on pregame, I like it a lot better. And in fact, a lot, and Tampa Bay's offense looked smooth last week. They won every 1v1 against that Washington defensive line. The Washington defensive line and the Washington defensive scheme was pretty stupid. I don't know how many people you have to ask who know football that know if you really want to disrupt Brady, you got to get at him very quickly and you got to get at him up the middle. And most of their schemes seemed like we're gonna go the long way around and we're gonna get there. And every single time a guy had a chance, the ball was already well down the field. So it was not the optimal pass rush to disrupt Brady. The Saints absolutely have it. We saw them do it in the second contest, and I don't 100% know what we're going to get from Trey Hendrickson. He matters a lot to me in the handicap here. If he's healthy, if he's on the field, he was a huge disruptive factor in that last game that they played. But it's the Bucs offensive line, as good as they've been, as talented as they are, they've let them down at times. And the Bucs coaching staff and Byron Leftwich and Bruce Arians, their concepts, their insistence to get Leonard Fournette involved, especially in the passing game, is so ridiculous. Imagine having the embarrassment of riches of Mike Evans, Godwin, Antonio Brown, Gronk. I mean, you have this embarrassment of riches and you're throwing swing passes to Leonard Fournette, who has cement hands. Like, it is mind-blowing that you would shoot yourself in the foot that way. And they do it constantly, and it makes me crazy. But that is, that is why I can't necessarily get on board that that this Tampa Bay Bucs offense is going to flex in this game. The Saints defense is good. They're healthy. They're going to be absolutely a tough test. And in the back of my head, I think what we saw with the Saints last week against the Bears was kind of what we accused Kansas City of doing a lot, which was not playing the good plays. That offense didn't look dynamic. It didn't look great. They get a punt returner Harris involved a lot in that game, and people are glowing about, oh, he looked great, but he's not your best option on the field. What the hell are you doing? They don't have huge margin at halftime. They finally start going to Kamara Moore and getting him in space, which was obviously what they should have done, much earlier in that game. And I think ultimately the Saints win this and move on to the NFC title game. I can't advocate taking the points with the Bucs, even though this should be a close game. I kind of want the under 52 because I think I can see a long tail to the under here, where both older quarterbacks don't look great in this one. I can see a tail to the under where Tom Brady gives us his patented. I say patented, but over the last 2 years, there's a lot of big games where Brady has not looked good. And he's going up against a good defense with a good defensive line. If they can get pressure up the middle, this could be bad Brady. There's nothing magical about what he did over the last half of the season. His offensive line played great. He has an embarrassment of riches in terms of weapons, and he went up against a bunch of terrible defenses. So not surprising that his numbers are just unbelievably good. I think the New Orleans Saints win. I think this is an under. I haven't made any bets. Andy, are you going to get involved with betting market on this one, or are you just going to watch till halftime?
I was poking around on Saints to win the NFC just because I agree with you. I don't know if it's not like I'm laying a lot of points, but it's a silly way to say it because it is a parlay. Like you have to win this game to make it work, but you get a pretty nice number against Green Bay. I'm not sure they match up. And then there is a tail risk of, and it's not a tail risk, it's a tail reward of the Rams accidentally winning a game, and then you have plus 240 against the Rams, and a very small amount of outcomes. Yeah, I can agree a little on the total. As enticing as all these, just start naming all the wide receivers and all the records that these quarterbacks hold. They are decent defenses, outside of our Murphy Bunting. And Murphy Bunting had an interception last week, man. He's coming along, and then the announcers were just glowing over him, which was fine. I had to thank you and have a little laugh. So it's I think the Saints are a very complete team, and I think I'm just stuck in the same spot where I don't know how to make sense of this Tampa team that has played so up sometimes. So probably live betting for me if the Saints defensive scheme looks like, oh, this is going to work against Brady. I'll lay the Saints -7, the Saints -10, whatever it is at that point, where if the defensive scheme works, the Saints can run away with the game again, and it won't matter what I don't want to say add any number. You never want to say shit like that, but essentially, you judge, and when you are live betting, there's some tricks to that too. Don't live bet your team when they have the ball. You can get a lot better number when, especially right after they punt, all of a sudden it drops a few points. There are some time decay issues with certain things. So I'll probably be looking at that one live. I like the Saints as well, and it's a good one to end the week with, though. I'm pretty excited for this game just in general. And like we said off the top, really good weekend of football, hopefully.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, Alvin Kamara could score 6 touchdowns. The other good, I don't know if you looked at the Saints injury reports today, Andy or Eric, but the other potential good news for the Saints, Taysom Hill limited in practice. He might not be good to go.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the leak for the Saints, right? Is that they try to cross the street 10 times on the way to the end zone. And that's why I like the Deontay Harris move, because you look at some of these offenses that, the Tyreek Hill, the Dolphins with Shaquem Grant, there are some of these smaller guys that can get separation really do help. But that's my worry, is that they just, there's not a big play in that offense, unfortunately. And as much as I've always liked Jared Cook as an athlete, but I've come to hate him over the past 2 years, because he's so soft, and he should be able to get open, in that seam, but it's the guy wants no bit of contact at all, and it's just they don't have. And Breeze, granted, couldn't throw it maybe if he had to, but there isn't that explosive component for that passing game, and that's what I worry about with them. Is you get the kind of you get a game where you're praying that their defense plays as well as they did against Chicago, or Chicago's offense plays as badly as they did, and that's a stove I don't know if I want to touch that much when the other side is Brady.
Okay. Did you bet this game, Eric?
I would look. I haven't. I took Tampa at 3.5. I don't think I can take them at 3.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I think Tampa at 3.5 was a good bet. I think, but ultimately,
the hard part is the quick handicap is that Brady is playing far better than Breeze is. Sure. But you add in the second order thing. All the second order stuff points to the Saints, which is why I don't hate them. I don't hate them to win the NFC. I don't, there are a number of things there, but 3.5 was, I think, too good of a number at that point.
Eric, what's your expected line, and total for that matter, for the presumptive NFC title game of Saints at Packers?
I would probably make it Packers -2.5.
Andy?
Total, I don't. What do you?
Total 1.5, 55.
Yeah. So total kind of probably 48.5, 50, somewhere.
I'm
in there.
I'm
Yeah,
going
see, I was going to say 49.
Where are you at, Andy?
I'm putting it at 55. I don't even care.
The total. Oh, wow.
Both offenses come out big. It comes out now. It won't come out that high, but I think low 50s. If the offenses perform, if both teams win on the back of their offense, it comes out low 50s and gets bet down. It'll be similar to this one.
We just thunder smash that under. I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
I like it. What do you think about the side? What's your number on the side, Andy?
1.5.
Okay. I'm closer to 3
Saints
on that.
favored.
Interesting. What is your expected line on the presumptive AFC title game, Eric, of Cleveland at Baltimore?
Right, you were making sure I was paying
Yeah, the way
attention
you
to that.
paused, you were always going to be a shithead there, weren't you?
So here's a quick, because you guys both like Baltimore. I think that's
I just
that's
want
a little
Cleveland to have
different. But I'll say this: if the Chiefs play a 10-point game against Cleveland and Buffalo beats Baltimore, I don't think that the spread's much more than 2.5 in KC.
Wow.
Because to you guys, to your point, Drew, the Bills are the people's champ right now, right? and everybody loves them, and everybody wants, a piece of that action. And it's like, to me, I think that's what the number that's going to be hung up there. I don't know. You guys think that's too low?
I think it'll be 3.5. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think you can go on the other side of 3. I think if the results, I guess I don't care who wins the other game for this exercise. If it's Baltimore and Buffalo, I have them so closely power rated. Either way, it's 4.5. I guess if Kansas City wins in an ugly fashion, maybe 3.5, 4. But I think for the most part, we end up with the 4.5.
Yeah, I think this week and next week, if you are a bookmaker, it is imperative that you make it through the week where you don't need a decision against Kansas City. Because I think on the weekend, recreational players are going to be awash with Kansas City money. So I think that's some of the reason we're seeing a 10, tickling 10.5 here with Cleveland. Like, I think they want this to be a decision. You want a Cleveland decision as you're heading into the weekend, because you're going to balance your books, with the rec players on Sunday.
Yeah,
that's my guess. Do you disagree with that, Andy?
No, I was shaking my head at Wyoming. They're getting the shit kicked out of them. Can't catch any traction in basketball.
Win some, you lose some.
I haven't tailed you at all this year, Andy, on mid-major basketball yet. Do it. Let me know when you get hot so I can. Okay.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It certainly hasn't been here yet. I did have a nice couple days, but man, a couple of these teams just aren't showing up offensively. I had to make some adjustments to my teams that can't score for 13 minutes at a time. Rankings.
A lot of games left, man. A lot of games left.
A lot of games left. So
also, do you know anyone?
NFL,
I don't know anyone good at college basketball who's done especially well this year, except for like one guy. It's been a weird, tough year.
Has Alan Boston been tweeting? Has he struggled this year? Has that been the subject of his tweets?
He's written like a really long. He wrote a really long piece about the Colonial League. And I only found it because it's like, here's part 2 of it. I'm like, did the Colonial League need a part 2? And I'd read some of it. That guy knows the Colonial League in and out. It's wild. A bunch of people I've never heard of. I liked it.
I haven't heard if he's getting down anymore in college basketball or not. I think, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
It's tennis season anyway.
It is kind of, yeah.
Shout out because he will listen to this eventually. Kelly, Big Ten Waddle, 3 for 3 on tennis outrights this year. I took some Hubie Hurkits, never in doubt today.
Oh, wow.
Sebastian Corda. Corda got hurt in the second set, maybe. You never know. Tennis injuries kind of turn into I'm losing, my groin hurts. Okay. Sometimes it's one of those. He might be hurt for real.
We've taken enough of the good doctor's time. Absolutely invaluable thoughts, and appreciate picking through these games with us and providing the insight to the people who listen to the Deep Dive podcast. I'm sure they all appreciate it as well. Best of luck to your Chiefs this weekend. I hope they don't cover, but they do win, and we get what we've all been deserving, which is Baltimore, Kansas City AFC title game. Before the season started, those two teams were on a pedestal, the clear 2 best teams in the NFL. And it would be all of our just rewards to see them face off with Baltimore peaking and Kansas City looking a little vulnerable. I think that would be a very fun AFC title game. So
after
that's all
we weren't sure we get this far. We get the end that we deserve.
Oh, yeah. Secret pod play. We missed a bunch of stuff. Ravens over.
Right.
Fuck it. It's Ravens over. Don't forget to sign up for WinBet. You got 1 week. If you're listening to this on Thursday, sweatshirts are coming off. Like I can't do it forever. I can't just print sweatshirts forever. You got another week. So go to Jersey, go to Colorado. Now.
I like it.
You heard me. Thank you, Eric. This has been great. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. And best of luck.
Yes.
Andy always tries to get the last word, and I hit the music on him. It's a running gag. No, I'm not even in on the running gag. I just like to say goodbye to the people. Well, they appreciate your talking over the end credit music.
Sometimes the end credit music glitches on my end, but you can always hear it right on the podcast.
Oh, I hear it the whole time. You don't hear the end credit music?
Sometimes it goofs up on my end.